Now that we understand how to use the geolocation API to get our location, I'm going to flip back over to my code editor and find my app component again. So we now know that this position object right here contains that latitude. We want to take that latitude. We want to figure out whether or not the user is in the northern or southern hemisphere, and then we want to use that to customize the look and feel of our page. For right now, we're going to set ourselves a little bit easier goal. Let's just say that we want to somehow print out our latitude right here. So in place of the string hi there, I want to get my latitude to display on the page. All right, now how are we going to do this? Well, that's pretty much the question that's going to lead us into understanding why we have to use class-based components. Let me walk you through the life cycle, or exactly what is happening inside of our application right now as it starts up inside the browser. And then you're going to understand why it will be really challenging for us to somehow put our latitude in here if we're going to continue using a functional component. All right, so over here. All right, so this is a timeline of what happens to our application inside the user's browser. We start off up here at the very top, where a JavaScript file gets loaded into our browser. The browser then interprets our JavaScript file, sees that we are trying to create an app component, and that app component gets created. Then at some point in time, the app component is going to be invoked, like this function right here. When that function is invoked, we then call our geolocation service. But the very important thing to keep in mind, and this is something that I'm going to repeat to you many times throughout the remainder of the course, is that getting this geolocation result back takes some amount of time. I don't know about you, but when I did the initial geolocation request, it took around like 3, 4, or 5 seconds for my browser to return my position. It only appeared to be completely instantaneous over here because I set up the hard-coded geolocation, or I did the override right here. When you do the override, it's going to return your position almost instantly. But if you don't do an override, it's going to actually take a pretty good amount of time. Let me show you, just to make sure that you see it from my angle as well. So I just refreshed the page, I turned off the override, now I'm going to wait a couple seconds, and it took like 3, 4, or 5 seconds for my position to finally show up once I turned off that override. So what's the issue here? Well, the issue is basically that we call the geolocation service, and then in the very next instant, our app component returns some amount of JSX. So we do this call right here. We call geolocation, and then execution goes down to the next line of code right here. We return our JSX, that JSX is taken, gets eventually turned into HTML, and then rendered out onto the screen. That entire process occurs, and we see content appear on the screen far, far sooner than we ever get a result from that geolocation API. So we're essentially just sitting there waiting and twiddling our thumbs, waiting to get back our position, and way long ago in the past, we already rendered our app component, and the contents of the app component are already visible on the screen. So right now, with this functional component, we don't really have any good way of waiting until this success callback right here, and then taking the position and sticking it into some JSX and return it. We just do not have that capability with a functional component. So what is the solution? The solution is going to be a class-based component in conjunction with React's state system. So let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we're going to start to refactor our app component into a class-based component, and then we'll start to talk about React's state system. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a moment.